I've started recording. Um, so don't say anything embarrassing on the stream, I guess. Um, that'll probably be more a something that I need to make sure I'm careful of, not saying anything embarrassing. Um, can you guys? Can someone tell me? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, you got a question. Um, can I switch to that? No, I can't. Not easily. Um, Okay. Oh, no, that wrong button. We got a question, maybe. Oh, okay. We're never mind. We're good. Thank you. Okay, share entire screen, and we are back. So yeah, this is the Jenga framework. I chose the logo to basic. So it's essentially an obelisk. An obelisk made out of Jenga bricks as the logo. Jenga is my dog, and I just thought that it would be cute to name it after her. But the reason for why it's an obelisk is because ultimately, and this is not necessarily like a requirement going forward in the future, but we started with obelisk for our code base. If you guys are familiar with the obelisk framework, which is basically just a full stack framework and a way to coordinate between back end and front end. And so, that's what we started using, and currently what the Jenga framework uses. I'm not stuck to that, but it was just a really great place to start, especially as we are really just a company that, especially at the start, we were very much just a company that just wanted to build something with Haskell. We weren't necessarily looking to build a framework at first. Um, yeah. So, and I think it leads well into this quote by Michael Scott and Isaac Newton. If you guys don't find that funny, that's it's just a stupid reference to The Office, um, which if you guys don't watch, it's an American TV show. Really silly, dry humor, where they say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, by Michael Scott, and that's actually by Michael Jordan. Um, or yeah, now I'm misquoting that one, but this one is actually by Isaac Newton. And if I've seen further, is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And so to like, basically, reason I added this quote in here is just to say that I've gotten into discussions about like the amount of pioneering work that is needed to do Haskell, and I think this is like there's two ways you can answer this. In order to become a Haskell company, right? Can you just go and start easily, or do you have to do pioneering work to get the actual business task done? And I think this is twofold, and this is also going to be like this is of course changing, um, like by the month in terms of just the number of different libraries that are coming out. I really don't feel like we have to do a ton of um, you know groundbreaking development work, and I think even a lot of the a lot of what we've done, what we've done with the Jenga framework is just by using what is kind of available in the ecosystem, with adding on where things are missing. So this is what the actual folder structure looks like, just to give you guys a kind of sense of the layout of the land. Um, we have our backend folder, our front end folder. We have a DB folder, which is managed by the framework, complete with migrations, which I actually forgot to give a slide for, but I will come back to once we're done the slideshow. Um, and then a common directory as a common library to be shared, types between backend and front end. And then the Jenga framework adds in the concept of a static site, which I'll come back to. And then also, this is not necessarily anything. This is actually kind of like a middle ground between Obelisk. Does Obelisk have it? Does Jenga have it? And Obelisk doesn't really talk too much about the fact that it has the ability to thunk, um, which I think is just honestly a matter of documentation, which I really honestly do think that Obelisk can improve upon its documentation, and that's actually kind of one of the key goals of Jenga is just to make it a lot easier to start by virtue of better documentation. Um, and yeah, and then a config directory, which also Jenga does a lot of building upon. And then our landing page, which is related to the static site, and I'll get to how that all is. And so one of the things that like I used to really dislike about Obelisk, and then because I started with Servant, and then I thought, can we use Servant instead of this? But I learned to like it just kind of by virtue of I sort of needed to. Um, and yeah, so like this is kind of the starting template. This is the route for the starting template that you would get when starting out with Jenga framework. And so what this is saying is like if we either have a way to decode a route as a front end route or a back end route, and it ultimately Obelisk has this idea, or the Obelisk route library has this idea of encoders. You can basically, in quick thinking, think of just like if I go to localhost 8000/authenticate, then it's going to take me to login. Or sorry, to I guess I would. I'm mixing up the two. It's too early. You would go to localhost 8000/login or my URL/login. Same with those, and then also the backend routes kind of break down into is this an API? So everything from like background route listen is an API, whereas landing are is our actual landing page, including landing base. And so that would just be, in any case that we don't recognize a route, we've configured it to route to our landing page. And so this is actually set up with our actual website. If someone types in, login but misspells it, it's going to take them to the landing page. Yeah. So with Jenga framework being again, going back to that whole talk about engineering, about pioneering work needed for using Haskell. I really don't think it's much at all to for most companies to start with Haskell. I don't think it's much work at all, and I think even the cases where you do need to do pioneering work, I feel like you would need to do those in any language whatsoever, but just in a different fashion, and then be constricted by the language itself. So maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah. So with the Jenga framework, like you would start out with essentially. Oh, is my computer not plugged in? One second here. Okay. With the Jenga framework, you would start out with with this config env as this struct here. And ultimately, the idea is that it's just like it's very easy to get started, and even like right out of the box, the Jenga framework comes with our full authentication suite that we have developed at ACE. So, for example, from this config env, and I'll talk more about this later, but just to give a concept of why we're talking about this, I I can from this config env, I have a way to build a login handler, build a reset password handler, build a request reset password handler, build an invite handler, subscription handler, etc. Um, and yeah, um, so that's why we have the config here, and it's really just quite simple. It's you know the Jenga framework kind of pushes towards using reader T. The reason being is I think this is a great way to learn monads, um, and it's also just a great way to architect the application. I'll get into that more as we get into the code. But ultimately, then to work with the Jenga framework, you just need to kind of tell me how to get an admin email, right? And so you'll implement the login handler, and it will say no instance for hasconfig admin email, and then this is how you fix it: is by satisfying that constraint by adding the instance. And so I kind of thought this was like neat to talk about. This is like yeah, so um, this is kind of exactly just what I was talking about before, like in terms of how I've built a lot of the framework is by like virtue of these like has configs. And so I know that if you have given me a way in your monad, right, in your reader T monad, to get access to some information, I can build you a route that performs a login, or I could or I can yeah, a login or reset a password. All of those are kind of working all the same way. So I'll just refer to it as just simply login from now on. And so for example here, we need this render full route backend because in order to perform for example, like reset password request, we need to send an email to the user. So, and they need to get a reset link that they can go and click, and then we know that this is the appropriate user coming from that email, etc. And so that requires this kind of mechanic of the render full route BE or backend. Which always, I mean, even too, I've just had a lot of annoying cases where with starting out with ACE, where we would send users an email and then we'd forget to add in the base URL. And so this is just a nice, simple way to use things for me. But yeah, and I think it's kind of funny. Like, this is definitely not an effect system by any means, but it's kind of I've learned recently that effect systems just use reader T, and so I wonder if there's like a number of ways to build on this in the future. But yeah, and this is kind of the core function that we need here is this asks m. And it's just kind of funny because we basically we also kind of use the compiler to tell us what the type of asks m is. So I don't actually have to label this as I don't have to label enc or enc as full route encoder because it will know by being passed to render backend route that this is a full route encoder. And so I could literally have just wrote asks m. Same with base URL. And I did the same thing with tables. This is also very necessary for building kind of an out-of-the-box auth framework. And again, also like I think with an out-of-the-box auth framework, it's kind of like it's kind of another way of saying like, yes, you can do awesome things with Haskell. Like we had for when we started, when we moved from being ACE Interview Prep to ACE Talent, we hosted an info session with Carnegie Mellon in Rwanda. And to be clear, right, not the American Carnegie Mellon, but the one based out of Rwanda. Um, and a lot of the questions were like, is Haskell maintained? Um, do people use Haskell? All of this stuff. Like, can I build X with it? Can I do data analysis with Haskell? And it's kind of like, yes, like of course you can. And even like there's great libraries that are out there to do it. Maybe there's instances you run into where something is missing, but I feel like you kind of have that with any language, where you find something that's missing, and that's kind of why you need to build stuff. Um, but so yeah. Anyways, so the has Jenga table is just basically the same idea, in that it's basically an overloaded constant. So it's a constant in terms of your database, your code base, um, and it's a constant that I can now kind of plug into to provide library functions. Um, and it's just this kind of the same simple idea of like asks table env, and we get this table env. In the future, I've considered having a way to deduce the table based on the config env, but I maybe that would be a little restrictive, and so I don't know of a good way to do that yet. But basically, this currently allows for a database host. Most of the Jenga framework is just by virtue of what we've done, for our own code base, is implemented with Postgres. And the reason for that is because of also hooking into um, Beam Auto Migrate, which I will talk more about. Yeah. And so this is kind of the starting database template that that one can start with. Again, if you don't even want authentication, you can easily just rip this all out. Like you could just take DB accounts, user type, GitHub IDs, invite links, valid org emails, free trials, Stripe. We also have subscription service, so we have a way to deal with Stripe. And even we also need this send email task to facilitate, sending emails, for example, with sending a reset password request. And so yeah, and so I think it's easier to provide this to sort of a brand new developer, and say, how it works. Like give them this template that they can kind of just see this is a database, and go from there. And again, I think I feel like it would have been so much easier to learn, going way back when, if it was like I could just go into a fully established code base and say, I want to add a handler that does something. I want to add a handler which takes a word and finds an image matching that word on Google or something. If I could just focus on that specific logic, I think that's where the learning would come in, to get the kind of basic groundwork of my thinking, and yeah, and so again, that's part of the goal with this Jenga framework, is that we can just right out of the box, a brand new developer can come in, and even easier than other languages, I would like them to be able to start with Haskell. And again, the reason for that is just that I think, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think I don't really consider any previous language to be my first language. I can consider Haskell to be my first language because I feel like that's where I really truly learned. I was a self-taught developer, way back when, and I thought I was told that the way to go about things was basically to look on Stack Overflow, which I guess is now transitioned into look at ChatGPT. And I don't think you don't learn really any of those ways. You learn by really thinking through a problem from start to finish, even if that's a very small problem. Yeah. Anyways, and this is like an actual definition of the login. And so you can see here we're using the extension the language extension type applications to help this determine what database we are using. And so since we have our database as a type, and it's like our actual Postgres instance is managed by our Haskell schema, we can just pass this type application argument, and it will tell with public JSON request response and auth login handler what we are looking at, what database we are looking at. And I also provide this function as part of the library. So this is maybe like a nice little example of like what the actual code might look like in terms of using the library. And this is actual code from our ACE repo. And so we have an invite handler where we have, we give the type application argument of DB. This background route argument, I will admit that's a work in progress. I want to get rid of that. That's kind of currently a constraint of using the Obelisk route library. And I think there's a way I have that might work to get around that so we don't have to pass that everywhere, because it doesn't even really make sense. We're not really it doesn't make sense. It's kind of confusing. But anyways, we are passing our DB type argument. We're using email, inviter, and a front end route. A front end route which is going to have or going to wrap our actual what is this? Our password reset token. I believe this is a password reset token, and so we'll have a route that like if front end route reset password is /reset, we would also have our token, and so that's why we need to pass that here. And then the next thing that invite handler takes is basically a definition for an email, and so we give a subject here. We have the inviter email and the actual link itself, and we just go and write our email through HTML. And the HTML that we are using is from Reflex DOM. Reflex DOM and other libraries if we so wanted to use them. Actually, I guess not so. But yeah, whatever would be appropriate for an email, as there is some constraints that do exist there. So let's say, and so what we haven't talked about here is this auth function. Auth basically checks for is this request authenticated, and if so, we get our user ID, this inviter, and we also are wrapping this with the this library function of with error reporting. So with error reporting is essentially checking for any variety of issues that could happen. Maybe invite handler throws a left, right? Purposely throws a left, saying like this is invalid email or something has gone wrong here. We cannot complete the request. Or there's just like a runtime exception that has somehow happened. Again, we could do whatever we want here. We could do an unsafe head and give ourselves a runtime exception. But in any case, that would result in an error. And so that would I kind of have this concept of that this type here, this invite handler, returns an either backend error backend error E, I should call it, or an A. So it returns either a backend error with kind of very detailed information, or the actual appropriate successful response. And I've distinguished between what a backend error is and an invite error is. So an invite error is just a very simple enum, right? Very simple enum. Maybe I'll show more about this, but kind of what do we expect could go wrong with invites? And backend error is, for example, an exception happened. There was no authentication, which is no authentication is not specific to invites. A number of different things, and or maybe it was for us specific. And so we kind of use this higher kinded type of backend error to give very detailed information, so that if I see an issue has happened on the platform, I can immediately see that, oh, like this happened right here, and I can get an email about it, because the with error reporting plugs into a task worker, which will send an email on any failed request, and so that's what this is. And it also has access to our environment information. Yeah, and I think that's it. And then basically this idea of specific error is basically just saying that, like, it's kind of using some Haskell magic. At least it feels like to me. I've never used this anywhere else before, but I can raise a type error if you try and say that a specific error is a string, or a specific error is a text. Then I throw an error saying that's actually not a specific error, because you will regret that in the future, that you don't have a specific error. And yeah, and also too, the other piece is, this is not just for myself, or for whoever is using the framework, but for the user. We can just have a simple instance called show user for backend error, and for invite error, and so yeah, and we can make sure that we have clear error reporting to the user even, as well as to ourselves. Next, so this is coming from ultimately the Rhyolite framework and the Vessel library, both amazing code bases. And here we've defined a vessel to be used with WebSockets, where, so for example, like for ACE, we have a chat application that we've developed, and in that chat application, of course, it'd be really annoying if you had to refresh to see new requests, to see new messages. So we need WebSockets in that case. So Vessel is a very awesome way of doing things. Vessel also, I've always been very curious to ask them. Vessel is also the name of a very talented artist. I'm curious if there's ever any connection there, but alas, I'll move on. And so what this vessel is saying is that in this map vessel, for a query about what contacts we have, return a semi-map, which is just basically a specialized map. I kind of forget what exactly it is. Return a map of emails by account ID. And so that, basically, so if we have a search bar, you can type into the search bar, I'm looking for example, my one of my our technical education lead, who's in Thailand right now. I could search for Kyle and see if he comes up. His username is Remsuda, so if I search for Remsuda, his contact will come up, and then I can click on him and start a conversation with him. And so that's what this vessel here represents. And what's cool about Vessel too, I haven't really taken a ton of advantage of this yet myself, but you can aggregate queries. So, like, for example, I think a more straightforward example than this one would be if a number of people were looking for the latest messages from a particular chat room. If a number of people were looking for that query at the same time, then Vessel can aggregate the queries into one, and there's a way that we can write it. Um, we can write a more optimized database query to take advantage of that information, and then reseparate and send back to the prospective clients. And so yeah, that's really cool. And I kind of also set up in the Jenga template a like a basic definition of WebSockets, so that it will require some learning of Vessel, but I think I'm going to add a lot of documentation and tutorials for how to do that. Not I think I will. And yeah. And then of course there's what's nice, the other nice thing, I think this gets more into the Rhyolite piece, is that from just pure vessels are just really the data structures. Rhyolite also has a very smart way of doing view and notify. So view being like the original view we see when we load the page, right? So we load the page, we're going to look up what are the latest messages, and then someone's going to, after that, when we've loaded the page, someone's going to send a new message, and that's going to lead to a notify, where it's going to lead to a different database query to ultimately just get that most recent message and then send to the clients. Yeah. Feel free to interrupt at any point for questions. Unfortunately, since there's usually two of us on the call. Again, my technical education lead is in Thailand right now. So usually there would be someone in the chat just looking for any questions. But yeah, might be best in that case to, if you have a question, just kind of interrupt verbally, and feel free to do that at any point. So yeah, we've talked extensively about the back end, and I'll actually, you know what, I'm going to escape this for a second and just go to our back end. So what's also nice too, this is a slide I forgot to add, is I have this, we're using we are using Beam Auto Migrate, which recently had a very nice update. I don't think it's actually even on its development branch, but it's pretty awesome. And it's basically just there's kind of two things that happen with the Beam Auto Migrate. Either we can automatically do a safe migration, right? So we've changed something in our our DB definition that will lead to a migration. So for example, like let's say we add in send email task 2, that will be a safe migration. It will automatically perform that that set of queries for us. But also it might be an unsafe migration, like removing send email task 2. And so we don't necessarily know for sure if we want to do that. And so they have this really awesome function called try run migration with edit, update, and hooks, where basically we have a pre-hook, a post-hook, and a way to operate on the migration plan that they came up with, which is pretty cool. This is kind of the step that I use the most. Most of the time, it knows exactly what it needs to do, right? So most of the time, it'll look like, I want to delete this table. Is that okay with you? based on your schema, I need to delete this table for it to be valid with your Haskell code. And so I would like to delete this table. And it won't automatically do that because that's, of course, a destructive action. And even forgetting our Haskell code, if we lose that data, we can never get that data back. So we don't want to do that. And so I have this kind of, what I've set up for myself is sort of this sort of checklist of what I've allowed. And so really it just starts how this list started out was, in any case, just don't mutate the edit. But if I wanted to say all edits are all unsafe edits are actually good to go, then I can just say mark safe, which is just a function I have here of changing the edit condition to safe. And then it'll perform that action. It even knows how to do those actions, and it will do its magic. Not literally magic, but it feels like magic because it's pretty awesome. And but yeah, so it sometimes in the case of more complex migrations, maybe we even want to really in a fancy way move one table into many other separate tables. We might need something like a pre-hook or a post-hook. I haven't really seen a case where I need this post-hook before, yet. But with a pre-hook, there was a case where it was just easier for me to say, just do a rename. So originally we had valid emails. You can now see that in our database it's valid org emails. And so it was just easier for me to run this action myself. And so by running this action myself, of course, there was no need for this step of the generated migration. So yeah, that's the part I left out by accident. Which is pretty awesome. This part, I've been really there's if you're keeping up with the new GHC versions, you might have questions as to why, and the answer is really just we haven't done it yet. We are currently still using GHC 8.10, and that will change very soon. I just want to kind of keep this as a I want to make sure that when we upgrade that it's a very safe upgrade, that there's not going to be other issues that could come up. And I think it's kind of getting to the point where it's becoming very safe to upgrade to the new GHC JavaScript and WebAssembly backends. But Reflex Platform has had this functionality for a while, where we can deploy our applications to WebAssembly. We can deploy to the web, right? We can through using GHC.js, which is just basically essentially a what's the word I'm looking for? A proof. It seemed like it was a proof of concept at the time to just see, can we even do this concept of having a compiler backend which is JavaScript, and so instead of compiling to binary or to C minus minus. Again, to my understanding, I'm not an expert in this area. Instead, we compile to JavaScript or WebAssembly. And GHC has a number of backends. So this is kind of adding on to the number of backends that we could have. We can also deploy to Android and iOS through Reflex Platform, which I believe is still very much Reflex Platform specific. I don't know if there's a generic way to do that through Nix at the moment. or sorry, just through Nix packages at the moment. Um, and of course, we can always build everything ourselves, but it's just easier to use this. Oh, and then the other sort of front end really is one that doesn't use any of these, and it's just our static delivery. And so this is something that we have developed fully. Um, and I'll get to why that is. And then also, I've developed a number of things to help with local development for iOS and Android, and also non-local development for iOS and Android. And so this is our Android app. We've recently deployed it. It's still in internal testing, so everyone in our community has access to it, but we haven't actually. I don't think it actually shows up on the App Store just yet, even if you know what to search for. And this is a bit overwhelming, but I thought this was worth talking about as well. This isn't technically a part of the Jenga framework, although it kind of is meant to be. This is a CSS, or I should say Tailwind library that I've developed because I hate writing Tailwind. I hate writing a string and then I have I make a lot of typos, and so I just really hated um, having Tailwind issues, and then I'm not sure why a button isn't blue, and it's because I never actually set it to the proper string, or I just forget what the exact definition is, and so I'd rather just use kind of GHC and Hoogle to figure out what I want to write. And here we are using also template Haskell to this is kind of like a little bit over. It feels a little bit over the top to me, even, but I think it's pretty nice. Is that like through this through the use of template Haskell, we can see if you've kind of done something funny, like for example, we can see like this call span. This is a short form way. This is a short form way of of saying, or like this operator here is basically a short form way of building a responsive element. So on the smallest screen size, this would be 1. We could continue to add to this, and it would continue to append to the screen sizes the appropriate amount. And this is just kind of using grid calls. And so yeah, it's essentially just a way of being responsive with it. But let's say like somewhere else, let's say we had the full suite here of like every screen size, and then we added in another thing for the small screen size, and so now we have two. Along the way, we have given 2 different configurations for small screen size. We don't want to play a guessing game of which one it should be, and so this will throw a compiler error saying that's not valid Tailwind that you've written. And what's nice about this too is that it's allowed me. So this is kind of where I get really excited about it. Is that like by having this here, it makes it a lot more clear where patterns arise in CSS. And again, I'm not obsessed with CSS, but I am obsessed with not having to think about CSS. And so there's a lot of cases I've seen where I'm like, oh, like I'm using this shell many times over. I could reuse this in 3 different places, and it will just work out of the box. And so yeah. And so again, it's responsive is kind of like the key idea. And then also too, this is kind of the more cool part. This is from Obelisk. Obelisk has this idea of static asset generation. So we have our static folder where we can put in, for example, a photo. And this little splice for template Haskell will confirm that image does in fact exist and that it will be there um, for deployment, right? So there's not going to be a time where we deploy our application and then we find out that it's not actually showing as an image; it's just showing as a little icon with a missing image. So that's pretty nice. And we expand upon that a lot. But also, yeah. So um, just a quick note here is that one of the nice things about Obelisk is that it has a very easy way to, again, there's ways just through Nix to easily get a Google server up and running, but Obelisk just has Ob Google, and so I think it's a very easy way for someone who's just learning Haskell to kind of interface with the language. As not necessarily everything is on Google. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but there's definitely a lot of cases where just packages are not on Google, whereas our local developed Google is going to have everything that they could possibly need. And with everything kind of already being packaged into the application, it should be very easy for them to sort of pull apart, like, what is this actually doing, right? So if they want to look at what is the login handler doing, they can go and then read my code very easily. And I think that's just a nice way to learn Haskell. That's even how I learned Haskell. Is I went through a lot of source code and just said, can I read this? Can I read this? Can I read this? What is this doing? Etc. And so yeah, the next part. This is the one thing I really felt was missing. Well, I guess there's two things I really thought were missing, but I guess I put this one first in the slideshow here. Is doing the markdown route, and so of course we could make our code a little bit nicer. We don't have to make our you know we don't have to put our quasi quotes in here, right? Quasi quotes being this kind of syntax that we have. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. I feel like I'm wrong with the name, but this is kind of the way that we delivered the session link. So I just I saw that Reddit was deleting my post anytime I put a Jitsi link in, and so I just basically put the Jitsi link at this page, and I just wrote a very quick little markdown script and was off to the races. You can see here I'm using a string. You don't have to use a string. I just have chosen for one section of my routing through for the blog to do a string, just to kind of make things a little bit quicker to deploy. But we can also make that a typed obelisk route. Yeah. And so this is kind of like the key thing where I went. We need to build, like, where obelisk needs to improve was this. This isn't the most exciting thing in the world to me, but of course, if our SEO performance was awful, then no one would come to our site. And that's just the way that the world works. So we had to make this better. Originally, we had a landing page that was entirely served through the Obelisk GHC.js front end, and I think our performance was about not like it was awful. I think it was like 45. That was like with other issues that were happening, but I think at best we were able to get it up to like a 55, 60, and it was still like just not going to serve what we needed to do. So enter in our kind of Vite-like static delivery, but better. I'm also not an expert on Vite. I just know it's kind of the new hot thing um, that people are talking about, um, and I think I don't know. I'm amazed by how many new JavaScript frameworks come out all the time. I'm kind of sick of seeing brand new JavaScript frameworks that kind of just still suck for different reasons. Again, maybe Vite is better, but it's still JavaScript at the end of the day. And so the less JavaScript that we can write, the better. Um, and so how do we do that? And we basically have this kind of configuration here, and from this configuration, I can provide a way to turn whatever code you've written, whatever Haskell code you've written, into just static HTML at compile time, right? So it's not anything crazy to turn our Haskell code into HTML um, at all. It's really like that's done in Reflex already. We can just use render static from Reflex. But with it being done at compile time, that means that at runtime, all we are doing is serving an HTML file, right? So we're still generating, right, we're still serving an HTML, but it's HTML that we have used types and used Haskell in its full wonder to build that HTML. Which has a lot less restrictions than, of course, using other ways to build that static HTML. But yeah, that's ultimately all it comes down to is just like the quickest way to do things is to serve directly HTML. Um, and yeah, and we use obelisk routing to handle that build process. And it's lightning fast. And I will show that later on. But yeah, and then this is how we plug in our landing page into the backend. Is we just have this obelisk route of landing R, which we saw before. Let's go back to it for a sec. Right, landing R, and we serve that. So that really select route to what landing page you want, and I believe there'd be a router defined somewhere that I have, right. There definitely is. I just showed it. This is the router here. Is the session link. And that would be how we select our landing page. So essentially, right, full routing to raw HTML files. And I don't think there's a better way to do things than that. Really, we just want to be able to quickly update our code when we're in local development, and then have hyperfast, production delivery, which is what we do. So how do we do this? Because we do plug into Obelisk asset generation, and the Obelisk asset generation is very good for ensuring that we have the access to the files on deployment. Right? If I've written this code and I have this markdown route here using another template Haskell splice. I have now guaranteed that this generated markdown file, this generated HTML, I should say, returning this markdown through the mmark package into HTML. I've now guaranteed that this will be available at deployment. Otherwise, my build will fail. So that's why, again, that's why we plug in the Obelisk asset generation. We have a template Haskell ensured deployment is the idea. And then for local development, we just we're writing to static site, which is actually, I should have another arrow from here to here. yeah, I should have another thing from here to here, not from here to here. This is actually completely wrong. You know what? I'm just gonna fix this quick. There we go. And yeah, Obelisk has basically they use reflex event listeners to see when we have written to static site, and then we'll perform that Obelisk asset generation. But since we know that we have that HTML locally, we just serve that directly when we're using localhost. Um, and lastly, kind of how we do this all is through Nix. Obelisk heavily uses Nix, um, and I think one cool thing that Obelisk has, I think I mentioned before, is Nix Thunk, which makes it really easy to work um, on libraries that you know I developed or someone else has developed, but aren't necessarily um, packaged anywhere very well. So and really how I need to do that, like let's say there's um, I'm always surprised when people don't know a ton about like Nix Thunk, but like basically you can just clone a GitHub repo somewhere, uh, work on it, right? Make changes to the code as if it's your own project, and then use Nix Thunk to use that in the build of your project. Um, and of course, if you know Nix, you could also just use fetch from GitHub. But even then, you wouldn't be able to edit the code as easily. And so it's just more of an ergonomic thing that we use heavily. So for example, I get the Jenga auth backend package um, using Nix Thunk. So this Jenga set is a Thunk set, which is just basically I give a folder path, um, and it creates a attribute set, a Nix attribute set, including Jenga auth backend and whatever else is in that folder, and then I can plug into it and call Cabal to Nix and build the package. It's also really easy to build to different platforms. So you know, this is a little bit of a lie. We have a Android.nix, but it's ultimately like I put this here because this is like true enough. The Android.nix has just basically some other configuration that we need. For example, we use certain permissions, and so we kind of need um, you know to customize our build a little bit to include those permissions as an XML file for Android to be happy. But ultimately, we are doing just Nix build Android, and that takes our front end, and it makes it not only a web application, but also makes it buildable to Android, and same to iOS. Um, yeah. Oh, and then of course, this is exactly what I wrote to deploy the new the I added this code for this session so that people would have access to the link, and then I just typed in obthunk update source. Source is the deployment director that we have, and then ob deploy push with verbose. I just like the verbose, but yeah, I think that's it. Any questions where we are at? Okay. So we've gone through that. So let's look at thunks. So like we have a lot of thunks, as I was saying. For example, we have our reflex clash, and then even reflex clash, which is just a number of very easy to use like oh, it's not okay. I gotta unpack it. Unpack. So this is like this is the package that I use the most. It's just basically this centering utility. So if I wanted to write some quick prototype code, it's very easy for me to just do that using this kind of centering code. I was trying to find an example of where I actually use it, but I haven't found one yet, I guess, um, in the very short time that I was looking for it. But yeah, it's very easy to kind of quickly get some sort of prototype UI up and running. Now, more interestingly, this is the Jenga set, and so Jenga. I'll just go through common first. So we have our Jenga config. Right, this is what we looked at. We have a number of like new types that are basically just like the reason specifically that I used a new type here was so that I avoided saying that I need to have because this all of it is done at a type level. I don't want to have anywhere saying has config env string, right? That would be very silly. And so like there's these are kind of like I guess you could there's only supposed to be really one instance of these. You can make a million of them if you wanted, but for the purposes of like the instances that you would write, you would only have a couple. So for example, here is like our actual config, right? So we just have this kind of like, okay, good. I was like, I hope I'm not going to expose anything here. I was sure that I wouldn't be exposing any secrets here, and that's actually part of the reason for the has config is to kind of separate out the concerns of how we get the config. There's not really any prescribed way that you're supposed to do that through Obelisk. And I think, of course, dealing with config is a very important piece. So yeah. But this is the instances that I would have for, how I would get access to a connection pool, or my client session key, or email config, etc. And I'm going to close that now. And yeah, and this is just basically every sort of new type that we can need for our full auth framework. And what else should I show here? Another that, like going back to the errors. So this is kind of actually how I've written the specific error instance. It's a very kind of dumb class. It doesn't really do anything except for ultimately just enforce this instance of type error. Right? Just basically saying you are not allowed to do this. I could also write another one for byte string. I probably should. I won't do that right now, but and then we have, for example, request error and front end error are something we talked about, but we have talked about back end error. There's that. There we go. So back end error is either going to be some user error, or a critical error that we have defined, or any of these other cases. So, maybe there's just no auth on the request. That's not, that's kind of to be expected that someone might try and make a request to that API without any authentication. And so we have that. That becomes just a kind of a plain old log into our database, which is something I'm adding reporting reporting functionality to the Jenga framework just to make it easy to have like kind of a I guess production level logging system, um, and which how it works for ACE is that we would log that someone tried to authenticate. Someone tried to request this without authenticating, um, and it would just become part of a report for us. Whereas, and really the same thing would happen for a user error. However, if either of these two happen, the with error reporting function will automatically instantaneously email me, or I should say, it will because of issues we've had with emailing in the past. I don't know. This is probably not necessary, but I think it's a good idea to kind of separate out the emailing component from our actual handler. We will put an email task in our database, and then we'll have a worker that will go and read that task and go and send us that email. Yeah. Yeah. So what am I saying here? The other piece is, of course, the the higher kinded argument of E, and so that's just whatever particular error that we have. I've chosen to make backend error a functor for no other reason than ergonomics. That sometimes I'll want to apply a specific function to the contained error in practice. But ultimately, the key idea is that it comes down to this show user function, where basically we build an error message based on the details that we have of the backend error data type, as well as the particular contained error. So, for example, let's see here. For a be critical, let's not be too critical. I'm kidding. Horrible joke. I'm just going to move past that. Something has gone wrong with the request and has been automatically reported. We apologize for the inconvenience. The error was this, and then we defer to our contained type, which we have determined needs to also have an instance of show user. Let's say, for example, that I guess I moved all the errors to auth. So there'd be something like, for example, add users error. This is an administrative function. So we had a use case for when we were working with Propel, where they wanted to, or sorry, Carnegie Mellon actually, where they wanted to add users from like a CSV file. And this is ultimately a CSV file. We didn't actually end up implementing the full-on CSV file, but they would just basically implement their user, or sorry, they would add their users through a UI, and add their users through a UI, and it would just be a list, a separated, comma-separated list. So this, let's say they had something go very wrong, right? Like this should never happen, ever. We, out of just like kind of a sanity check, I've added this into my my code just to again make sure, because Beam technically says that this could go wrong in practice, and so like let's say this error ever did happen, that we have no org code, which again should not happen, but that would be defined as a critical exception. So it would say something has gone wrong with your request that has been automatically reported. We apologize for the inconvenience, and the error is that no organization code was found. And so why I think this is important and worth kind of talking about, while it's like incredibly simple, is that like us as a startup, we kind of expect some things to go wrong, and so like I have loved having just emails come to me immediately the second the sun goes wrong. I feel like emailing functionality is kind of like the most important thing that I can implement as a startup. Because I need to get that. Or something like this email error reporting, I should say, is like kind of the most important thing I could have as a startup. And actually, I just saw a recent talk by the founder of Stripe saying they did the exact same thing, where anytime an error happened, they would send an email to the user saying, hey, manually send an email to the user saying, like, we're sorry that this has happened, we're remediating the request, etc. And so it just gives like kind of user trust, I think. What else? What else would be good to talk about? Probably the handlers. So, and again, these are still work in progress. The code even I don't consider Jenga released yet. It is technically public-ish. I don't think the repo itself is public yet, but the code definitely needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So we have this login handler. This is kind of what it looks like, or rather, this is what it looks like. And currently, we're using just like cookies to get to authenticate. The reason for that is, I've looked into past attempts to use Obelisk for like mobile. I forget what the name of it is. I know the username is Eskimor, but it's a baby monitor, and I noticed that they actually they kind of avoided using anything besides WebSockets. And I guess WebSockets are easier to use with mobile, but it kind of caused a lot of issues, and I don't know how it ever worked, to be honest with you. I don't know if they had authentication for that system, and so this is what I've developed. I'm very open to feedback on it, but yeah, it ultimately just this is the login handler. So by trying to implement this, let me see where I actually have this code. No, I would have it at... Oh, no, wait, sorry. This would be in backend.hs. There we go. Oh yeah, actually we've already seen the code. But alas, here it is again. And now we would actually use this. And so one thing I was kind of worried about is that by using all of these different constraints, I'm gonna just close that again now. But by using all these different constraints, I was worried that it might make things really difficult for the for the user. But it seems like it's actually been pretty ergonomic so far to use. Yeah, basically with an email and a password, try logging in. Try login. What does this do? And this is basically just going through our. Maybe this is a more interesting function to look at here. Is let me just even pull that up there. So it's a reader T monad that we are using, or that the user of the library has to use. That config right? That config has the constraint of it needs to have a way to give me a pool um, of database connections for Postgres specifically. um, and that database that we are going to use, it has to have a user type table and it has to have an account. And if it does, then we are able to run this function. And so I start by just getting access to the tables that the user has given me. We get the user by email, and we do a number of checks. Ultimately, just see can we log in. And so this has undergone a lot of refactoring recently because I had a lot of other things that were in here, but ultimately. I've just kind of simplified it a lot more. It used to actually contain Stripe information and check if they were still a subscriber, but again, we don't even use that anymore. So it was basically just not doing anything, at least for Ace. Yeah, just basically go through and see if any of these errors have happened. So maybe we have a user error of they've given us an email that we don't recognize. And also maybe it's not a valid email. That's something I need to do. We tried. This is the login function from Riolite that we call with our database env, and so this is where the constraint for the has config of pool connection comes in. Is using this with dbenv. And then based on the case of the login result, we either have nothing or we found an appropriate user. And again, we throw a user error of incorrect password. And then here we check if we could find a user type. This is not going to do anything in a simple application. And even for Ace at this point, we've kind of become a simple application. So most of the login, most of the auth functionality that we developed is now something we don't even need. But alas, it's in a library, so you guys can use it. We check if the user type exists in our user type table we get from the user. From the library user. We either see that for this user, right? If we have a user and we know they exist, but they don't have a user type, something has gone wrong along the way. And so we throw a critical error, which is just basically, right, we're kind of, I even have a sort of a constant because I called pure left be critical so much, and that's a very easy refactor. But basically, just saying that they've had the error of we could not find a user type for their issue, and that is a critical error. So even let's just make things abundantly clear here. If I was to write this here, then I would get a log report about it every 4 hours or so. Whereas with the be critical, just by adding in that, just by changing the data constructor that we are using, I automatically get an email immediately if I find that one of our users has no user type. Something has gone horribly wrong, and I want to fix that immediately. And then we either see that they are an administrative user or just a normal user. Maybe they are a sub account of the company. So for example, Carnegie Mellon would have been our admin user, and then self would have been would have been a student from Carnegie Mellon. Whereas I guess even for Ace, technically we are an admin user, and then we have an admin account, which doesn't we don't really use, but sorry, and then anyone who is on our account, or sorry, is on our application would just be a self user, and yeah, I think that was pretty extensive. Does anyone have any questions, or like, is there anything in particular that like would be cool to look at next, or um, any curiosity points? We usually do 2 hour sessions. Sorry, we usually do 2 hour sessions. We're trying to bring that down, but um, we are ultimately we're flexible for time. If anyone does have any questions. In the meantime, though, I'm going to try to see if there's anything else that might be interesting. Oh, and then also like um, one of the nice like with the goal of Jenga framework being that we just want to for a user to kind of come in and let's say they're going to build a weather app, um, like we want them to be able to quickly get that up and running, um, and so like we can use, for example, this HTTP JSON library, which is just basically um, a way of um, a way of it's a higher order function, which ultimately just takes something that we could do on the back end, and it plugs into all of our Jenga specific config functionality. So okay, this is unpacked. Cool. Since we like, I think the best like kind of demo for time is anything like it's basically just looking at our landing page and how it's defined. So this is our landing page and our select landing page function. We also have our get main landing page, which is technically a different static site definition. But yeah, this is our kind of router. So we match on all of the different routes that we could have, and we just get the page compiled. So for example, how would this work with our blog? Let me just get this this actually running. So we have a blog page here, and it's just a bunch of like a bunch of Haskell code. We have different blog posts that we have. How does this actually look in context? This feels like a shameless plug, but I mean, I've already talked. It's obvious that we are ACE. But this is our website. This is generated through the framework. And we're just using kind of render static to build all this, and the static images that we see here. So for example, signal over noise is, oh, that's wrong. Pardon me. That's where I should have better naming. But these are like, okay. Well, this is correct at least. The images are incorrectly named, I guess. But yeah, so like, this is just an example of of code there. Do we have this loaded? So 8,000, yes. So we could go to our blog here, and actually let's fix this. Signal over noise. So signal over noise, it looks like the two were messed up. Everything you love about object-oriented is a bug. And so I'm just going to swap this with signal over noise. Everything you love about OOP is actually a bug. Oh, okay, these are just reversed. So this is just a Haskell. And I'll just show it quickly. Did I have an error? Oh, there we go. So now, yeah, we changed our code here, and we fixed that issue. Let's go to. We don't actually have a link to this, so I'll go to the session link. So this is a what was it? It was, let me do this. It just needed to be capitalized. There we go. So now, to show here, we go to this here, and we just want to change this, and we say, bah, or whatever. It instantaneously updates for us. So, kind of, that's one of the, like, it seems very simple. That's one of the things that, as I understand, is a very important thing for the Vite framework, is that the build process is hyper fast. I'm not sure, I haven't benchmarked how fast this is just yet, but I do know that, by the time that I get to my my browser, that it's always updated. It looked like it took a second here, but even I think that was because of the of changing the I think that was because of changing the image, and so we had to wait for the image to update. Where is this? Here. Everything you love about object-oriented. Okay, well, let me just add in here. Oh, I'm on the wrong, that's why that's happening. Okay, and we're on blog. So now we see A there. Okay, let's change this to hello. And we update. I guess it's not, it could be made a little bit faster, and I have some ideas to make that happen, but yeah. So it's pretty fast for just building our page. And also, the reason I use the Markdown package, or the mmark package, is landing.hs. Let's say I did something silly, like I had a malformed link here. This is going to throw a compiler error. So this is really nice, I think. Um, you know, some people find this annoying that it's hyper strict about its markdown. However, I really like this because this would be really annoying if I deployed and then um, the link itself did not work or it showed up very weirdly. It would just not make a good impression. And so all it really takes is fixing. All it takes to fix that is just simply adding in that bracket, and we can see that it now works again. Yeah. So I think that's pretty extensive. Oh, and if I wanted to, I can just go and look at my generated HTML here. And so this is the actual HTML that it generates. And I could go and I could, sort of debug why what's happening is happening, etc. And then, yeah. Because we're not using GHCJS, and the reason for that is because if we look at our inspect of, let's say, for example, how can I show this here? Sources, are, what am I looking for? Do not include. Huh. Oh, right. Oh, okay. No, sorry. My bad. We have this script here. This is all of our JavaScript that we use. And of course, it is just raw JavaScript. But the reason for this, and I this is something I want to continue to work on. I want to basically build a very lightweight version of, or find or build a lightweight version to use Haskell to generate our JavaScript. So this, which is exactly what GHCJS does. But if we look at, for example, login, and we inspect this, our all.js is just absolutely massive. There we go. It finally loaded, right? So even think about how long that took to load. And this is just all, as I understand, code from the compiler. So that's not really, we can't really use that in the context of a landing page. And so we kind of need something like this. Or something like this, I suppose. Which I hate writing JavaScript. This has been like, even any JavaScript I write just takes like 10 years off my life. But there is definitely ways that I could make a lot of the core functionality a little bit easier. Funny story too, like I actually have experimented with adding in like on click tags, and I actually had a full on click, I had a full DOM switcher function in like an on click tag, and so literally like the this is again a very crappy way to do things, but I generated this through Haskell code. Is I had an on click function which like just swapped out the DOM, and it had the full like replacement DOM in that function, and so the actual like on click tag was just like massive, and it turns out it worked, but it was very funny that way. So yeah. And I believe I even details, was it? No, I forget where, but I have a number of things just to help with building um, JavaScript. Um, and make it a little bit less buggy. But yeah, it's still again a work in progress. So I'll stop there. Um, no problem. Thank you, Zen. Thank you for saying thank you. Um, and yeah. Um, any questions, or if not, I think we will end there.
Not so much a question, but yeah, that looks really interesting. I came in a couple of minutes after he's just started. This also you compiles nicely to both iOS and Android as well. So you've got the that convenience as well if you need to get things to mobile phones.
Yes,
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Like there was a couple like like Obelisk Obelisk does like already kind of deploy to iOS and Android, but there's just like
Mm,
with it being a full stack framework, some aspects of the full stack framework will like fail when trying to use when trying to connect your backend to the Android app. Um, and so I've done a lot of improvement there, um, and that was actually like, that was a good majority of the time that was needed. Um, yeah, so like um, which I haven't really talked too much about, but yeah, it ultimately just came down to like the way that we authenticate was the key difference.
right.
And
So there's
sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
there's a difference between how authentication best works for Android on a mobile versus what you do for just a website, or if it was a standalone website. So what you're saying, or was it just something more, a little bit more in the technical workings of Obelisk, etc.?
So the way that the Android, the way that Obelisk deploys to Android is by using an Android web view. So everything is, basically your Android application loads up like a web view immediately, and then you spend your entire time on the application in the web view, um,
Yeah.
which is is maybe there's like I want to kind of look at like is that necessary? Is there a way that we could like avoid that in the future that we have to use a web view? Because there are some consequences that come with that, but it does make it a lot easier to quickly deploy to Android and iOS, I guess. Um, so so yeah, but basically the key difference that happens is that when we are on Android, our base URL is different. Um, our base URL in Android is appassets.androidplatform.net instead of localhost or um, acetalent.io. Whereas like with
Right.
web, right? With web, we're just at acetalent.io the whole time. So there's like no need to consider cores for our authentication. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Um,
Well,
yeah. And then yeah, like I think even just like um, you know, like I'm this is like cool. We have most of the people here are from like the community, right? And so like with you guys, like I just kind of think of the jump from project 2 to project 3 is like absolutely massive. Um, and I think like that's kind of like the key goal of this framework is to make that project jump a lot easier. Because I think there's so many different things to think about that like it's kind of nice to have as something to start with. You know, I mean, Nick, you've already completed project 3. Um, but uh, but yeah, so
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, when you're going from project two, you can just really go from just fundamentals of understanding Haskell. Whereas with obviously project three, you need that understanding of authentication and stuff. So if it's the first time you've done anything like that, you have to go away and do a lot of research. So this will sort a lot of that things out. You're not going to have to go and look at JWT and I
Mhm.
actually didn't realize there was a JWT library and ended up writing the thing for myself. So this will save a lot of those kind of things of doing things for yourself when you didn't really need to.
Right,
So putting it all in one place, definitely, that'd be great.
right,
Gives
and
them to play with.
and actually, yeah, that's one thing I'm like planning to do is implement like JWT functionality, because like I basically like I know it's like very commonly used, but I want to avoid implementing something unless it's like I completely understand why specifically it's needed. And like there's other ways around. There's other ways to like to handle like role based authentication, um, which I've done so far, and so maybe there's a way that it makes more sense to use JWT. But I also maybe that's even um, that's something to look into for if I should do that kind of thing. But basically, just right now, just using cookies and yeah,
Yeah. I mean, either way, there's just having to have some sort of authentication, isn't it? So
totally.
if that comes packaged in there, you just use what's packaged in there as opposed to having to uh, learn it from start. But yeah, no, that's great.
Mm. Um, but I'm curious, um, especially like for those who are kind of like on project two or project three, like do you think like this kind of thing would be um nice to have is like so basically like the I was gonna get fancier with it, but now I'm like I don't see why I would. Um, I think this is just a GitHub repo I have on my. Um, this is now just a GitHub repo. So where is it? Jenga. Oh, did I never push? But basically, like it would just be that you would. Um, Here it is. So you would basically just like clone the repo, and that would be like how you start with it, and so you would be able to like immediately just get going with building your application. Even if you like need login or whatever, like you kind of already have login like set up, and you could just go about building like a weather app or whatever. Which maybe we'll do like we'll kind of I think next week that's what we'll do is we'll just build like a weather app or um, kind of a whatever the classic beginner application is for brand new developers or those who are getting into web development. Um, yeah, and I'm also curious. Like, did anyone like find like the Haskell magic piece is confusing, or like, do you think anyone would get tripped up by that, or um, like for example, like the back end error stuff, or the the type applications?
I think from what I saw, it looked really clear. Looked like a quite a common sense approach to it. I think that is the kind of next step in Haskell from the step up, isn't it? It's understanding those more complex types and and how they all stack up and build in. So I think having you going through that and showing that here, I think if you then followed up next week with kind of building, like you say, a simple weather app or something that's similar to that, then
Mm-hmm.
people can see how that's being used and how that actually works in practice. I think that'll probably connect the dots for a lot of people. But in terms of how it's written, I thought it was a very clear way of laying it out.
Right on, right on. And what's cool too is like maybe we'll even try and do this with oh okay. Yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what I'm gonna just to like just like um what I am thinking too is like we'll like to make it fun, we'll or to make it more fun, we'll make the weather app in a way that you might like could make the weather component, the weather service, like a plug and play library like Jenga auth, right? So, and I think this like I think this is a good way to demonstrate monads, and like because ultimately like we're using a monad here with like with has config. Oh, I moved that. Right, we're using this monad here um, to kind of keep like a common context among um, applications. So, like, if anyone who's using Django framework, we know that they are using like a reader t config, and so we can say has config, for example. This obviously wouldn't matter for render full route backend, um, but has config weather API key or something like that. Um, and then we could we could build it that way. And then by virtue of monads, um, we can easily just like allow someone else to use our library, assuming they have the same kind of reader T context. So um, yeah, and then yeah, whenever Kyle gets back, we'll continue on the video game. Um, yeah, maybe even before he gets back, but we'll do the weather app next week. That seems like a good way to go. While I have everyone here, so like this is awesome. We have like kind of our like you know our like kind of regular group, everyone from our regular group here. Um, what do you guys think about moving a session 1 hour earlier? Um, or actually, wait, crap, because tomorrow is daylight savings time, and it might even be an hour earlier. What is daylight savings time? Daylight savings time. The clocks go forward. Gain an hour. Clocks fall back 1 hour. Okay. Well, it will even be. Hmm. Maybe I'll pause on that for now. I guess. So that would be so. If we did 9 next week, that would be 2 hours earlier, right? I don't know. I guess I'll still ask. Like, what do you guys think of that? Like, would you guys be able to do that time? Or I know we're all in like different time zones. Okay. Okay. Feel free to say no. I'm not gonna be mad.
Hello,
Oh,
can you hear me?
yep, yep. What's up, Raymond?
Uh, for you, it will be 2 hours more or minus
2 hours earlier.
earlier. Okay, so I believe that will be around 6 for me in the evening. Oh, it's okay.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Um. Okay. Cool. Seems like we're all on board with that. All right. All right. Um. Well, okay, I appreciate you guys with that change. I'll be honest, we only started doing them at 10 because I was just like, I'm not a morning person. But I think I'm finally getting used to it. So, 9 just even makes more sense. No problem. 9 just even makes more sense from like a, because we seem to always go over time for sessions, right? Even for like the video game stuff. I feel like we've especially been going longer for time. And yeah. So, you know, just better to start earlier, therefore. But cool. I'll end the session there, but awesome to see you all again.
Thanks again.
No worries. Someone said, if I have not seen... because... if I have not seen... That'd be a lot of weight to carry. Alright. Peace out, guys.